Welcome all, Dax here. I'm back with another Halo campaign review leading up to the release of Infinite. For this video, I'm focusing on the 4th numbered Halo installment, as well as 343's first go at the franchise. As with the other campaign reviews, minor spoilers will be present throughout, but let's just start out with Halo 4's story. After drifting through space for several years, Cortana awakens Master Chief after a group of Covenant board what's left of the Forward onto Dawn. The mysterious shield world of Requiem's gravity well pulls Master Chief onto the surface. While on the planet, Master Chief encounters a new group of enemies called the Promethean. An ancient Promethean warrior called the Didac is released from his imprisonment during Master Chief's visit. The Didac deems mankind as unfit to take up the mantle of responsibility, with quick plans to restore his position of absolute power throughout the universe. While on Requiem, the Master Chief also learns that Cortana has surpassed her 7-year expiration and is now beginning to show the advanced signs of rampancy. Between the threat of the Didac and Cortana's worsening condition, Master Chief more than has his hands full in this installment. Cortana and Chief believe that there may be hope to save her if they're able to find Cortana's creator, Dr. Halsey. But in the meantime, the Didac presents a more immediate danger that Master Chief must address. After receiving Cortana's distress beacon, the UNSC Infinity also crash lands on the Shield world. We meet a new crew of characters who each vary in depth and personality. The main standout here is Captain Del Rio, as well as his contentious relationship with Chief. This new adaptation of Master Chief is the most expressive yet, which feels slightly out of place when compared to his previous interpretations. I'm not opposed to a more dynamic and colorful Master Chief, but it definitely took me a moment to adjust. As far as the Didac goes, he is definitely presented as an imposing and menacing force, but is barely given any meaningful screen time. I think as a whole, Halo 4 does check off most of the boxes 343 set out to accomplish. Halo 4 makes some interesting choices when it comes to the presentation department of the game. Straight off the bat, I found it jarring to see Master Chief and Cortana with these new looks. I think Chief's armor looks good, and I'm mostly indifferent to Cortana's look. Visuals aside, neither change makes sense from a story perspective, considering Chief was in cryosleep the entire time after the ending of 3, and unless Cortana received the newest OS update, it doesn't make sense that she would have changed this drastically. It would have been less off-putting if there was some sort of narrative reason to the changes. This visual inconsistency was also immediately present with the Covenant. The first time I encountered an Elite, I thought it was some sort of new alien, with the game feeling the need to clarify for me what I was looking at. Once I got over the new designs, I did find there was a visually beautiful game here to experience. Being released for the Xbox 360, Halo 4 does do a great job of surpassing its predecessor in visual quality, even though it was released on the same hardware. Halo games always give players a variety of different visual settings to battle it out, with this installment really mixing things up. The soundtrack here also takes a similar approach of let's try something new. Many of the new tracks are great pieces in both the tone and production quality. For me personally, I would have liked to have seen more pieces that tied back into the original trilogy, with this soundtrack feeling somewhat disconnected from the series' past. When it comes to the lore and universe building, Halo 4 is easily the most expansive title since Combat Evolved. This expansion is greatly attributed to the new directions in story, but is also due to the fantastic playlist of locations visited. There's a little bit of everything here, from jungle to desert to space and spaceships. Each location feels very opened up and free with all the usual combat scenarios. I will say, compared to the prior games, there does seem to be an extra emphasis on moving to a section, wiping out some enemies and pressing a button, then doing the exact same thing again 2 more times. This format is kind of classic Halo, but it does seem a little overutilized here. When it comes to the gameplay, it would appear that 343 Studios took note of what made Bungie's Halo trilogy fun: unique enemies, varied weapons, and creative vehicles. Now with that said, 343 does struggle here to find the same level of balance found in any of the first 3 titles. First, let's talk about the enemies. The Covenant as a whole plays a little different, but replicates much of the original dynamics found in prior games. However, the newly introduced Prometheans do muddy things up. I like the Prometheans in concept, but found them to constantly incite messy but repetitive shootouts. Knights are extremely unpredictable due to their varied weapon selection mixed in with their abilities to teleport and soak damage like a sponge. Crawlers serve as both a ranged opponent as well as one that charges right at you. Then there are Watchers, who fly around and also attack you from range while doubling as a support unit for Knights, adding to their already ridiculous ability to take damage. Every encounter with Prometheans felt like a rinse and repeat process, beginning with taking out the Watchers and Crawlers as to have a chance against the remaining Knights. Due to the Promethean Knight's ability to absorb high levels of damage and their unpredictable movement, I was often frustrated by how quickly I went through my always low supply of ammo. It almost felt like I was supposed to be playing a survival horror game with how scarce ammo is at times. The only problem is, in survival horror games there aren't Promethean Knights that require an entire round of ammunition to take out. Shooting feels mostly satisfying, but is definitely hampered by this lack of balance. I often had to swap out my preferred firearm for a less than ideal one. The selection of firearms here are of good quality and quantity, but there were only a handful of weapons consistently available, making the large selection feel a lot smaller. Many of the new Promethean weapons are interesting in design with cool animations, but most of them play very similar to an already existing classic. Although I personally didn't dual wield very often in the previous two titles, I do find the omission here to be rather disappointing. One carryover from Halo 3 is present with the use of armor abilities. We have several returning and revised abilities such as jetpacks, invisibility, and holograms, as well as some new ones like Promethean Vision. I personally found myself gravitating towards the jetpack most due to the liberating feeling of extra verticality in each scenario. Lastly, there are the vehicles, which I believe are able to match the fun factor of those found in Halo 3. Surprisingly, most of the established roster of vehicles are missing here, with only a handful of classics available. With that said, I did have a ton of fun riding the Mammoth, and I absolutely loved using the Mantis at any chance given. It's hard to beat walking around and shooting enemies in a mech suit. The combat definitely has some high highs between the new vehicles and the armor abilities, but is also plagued with the lowest of lows found in any mainline game. Halo 4 sets out to execute new ideas with somewhat mixed results. The story is a relatively solid and entertaining affair, while the gameplay struggles to find the same level of consistency found in Halos 1 through 3. 7.5 out of 10. I do think Halo 4 is a good game, with even certain aspects being improved over any Bungie title before it, but overall there just isn't the same level of balance here. Feel free to check out my other Halo reviews, and definitely leave me a like and subscribe if you like my content and want to support my channel. I understand many people have differing opinions about Halo 4, and I would love to hear yours down below. I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, see ya!